Good afternoon. I will call to order the October 19th meeting of the Minneapolis City Planning Commission. My name is Matt Brown. I serve as president of the commission. I am joined today by Commissioners Kronzer, Magrino, Slack, and Gisselman. Our first item of business is to approve the actions from the October 5th meeting. May I have a motion to approve those actions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Our next item of business is to organize the agenda. You can find hard copies of the agenda in the hallway on the blue sheets of paper. We will determine which items will be on the consent agenda, which items we will discuss, and which items will be continued. So starting at the top of the agenda, our first item is 365 Nicollet at 315 Nicollet Mall. That is a final plat for an apartment project there. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 1? Seeing no one, we will put that on consent. Item number 2 is the Loring Park rezoning study. We will discuss that item. Item 3 is the Village Market at 912 East 24th Street, 2301 Elliott Avenue South, and 2218 through 2220 10th Avenue South. That item was continued from the August 17th and September 21st meetings. We will continue that item again today to the November 2nd meeting while we wait for some additional traffic analysis on the project. And if any of you here were wishing to speak on that item, we did take a fair amount of public testimony at the initial meeting in August. Everyone who showed up had an opportunity to speak, so I don't envision taking a lot of additional public testimony on November 2nd because the application hasn't changed, but nonetheless, we will consider it at that meeting. So we'll continue that item to the November 2nd meeting. Item number 4 is Carmel Plaza and Square at 2910 through 2936 Pillsbury Avenue South. We will discuss that item. That is an expansion of nonconforming use and a site plan for a shopping center there. Item number 5 is Eco Culture at 3721, 3725, and 3731 Chicago Avenue South. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that? That's a conditional use permit for a shopping center in an existing building. Seeing no one, we'll put item 5 on consent. Item number 6 is the Car Care Clinic at 5415 34th Avenue South. That's a conditional use permit and a site plan review for an auto repair business. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? Seeing no one, we will put that on consent. Item number 7 is a monopole telecommunications tower at 5417 33rd Avenue South. That's a conditional use permit for a new monopole telecommunications tower. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? Seeing no one, we will put that on consent. Item number 8 is the Weber Park Library at 1407, 1411, 1413, and 1423 45th Avenue North and 4414 Humboldt Avenue North. Several applications for a new library there. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? If there is no one here, we will put that on consent. Item number 9 is Downtown East Phase 3 at 521 4th Street South and 425 Portland Avenue. Conditional use permit and a site plan related to a new park at that location. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? Seeing no one, we will put that on consent as well. Item number 10 is at 101 First Avenue North. Site plan review and plat for a new multifamily building there. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? Seeing no one, we will put that on consent. Item number 11 is 100 Hennepin Avenue. A site plan review and plat for a new mixed-use building there. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? Seeing no one, we will put item 11 on consent. And item number 12 is a zoning code text amendment related to emergency and overnight shelters. We will continue that item to the November 2nd meeting. So our agenda as amended is as follows. Items number 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 will be on consent. We will discuss items 2 and 4 and continue items 3 and 12 to the November 2nd meeting. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, may I have a motion to continue items number 3 and 12 to the November 2nd, 2015 meeting? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our Committee of the Whole consent agenda. And Commissioner Slack, you have an update.
Thank you, President Brown. At the October 8, 2015 Committee of the Whole, we heard one item, land sale at 2015 and 2109 Jackson Street Northeast. The recommended motion from that meeting was to approve the staff report that the item was consistent with the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth.
All right, thank you. And I will take that as a motion to find that that land sale is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Is there a second? And we have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, we will move on to the public hearing portion of our meeting. Mr. Wittenberg, did you have a comment?
Commissioners, it was just brought to my attention that a variance was missing from item number 10. It is accurately reflected in the staff report, I believe, but it's missing from the agenda.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And next, we'll move on to the public hearing portion of our meeting. At this time, I'll open the public hearing for the items on the consent agenda. That is items 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Is there anyone wishing to speak on those items? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And Mr. Wittenberg provided a clarification on item number 10, but otherwise, could I have a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda? All in favor? And that motion carries. We'll move on next to our items for discussion. Item number 2 is our first item, the Loring Park rezoning study. Staff is Beth Elliott.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. We are here to present the staff recommendation for the Loring Park rezoning study. The team that is available this afternoon is myself, Joe Bernard, and Chair Steve Munson, our Director of Long Range Planning. So as a reminder, I know we've spoken to you a couple times informally about this project. As a reminder for you in the audience, there are 3 purposes for a rezoning study. One is to encourage the type of development envisioned in adopted plans in a geographic area. The next is actually to prevent the type of development that is inconsistent with the plans. And finally, we as a city have a legal obligation to ensure that zoning reflects our adopted land use policy. But a rezoning study is about the future of development, not what is on the ground right now. The role of CPED staff as we conduct a rezoning study, we really try to balance the interests of the study area with a citywide perspective. And to bring forward our professional recommendations generated from our technical expertise. And we also like to keep in mind related plans that may influence the study area. So we are doing this rezoning study based on the adoption of the Loring Park Neighborhood Master Plan in 2013, almost exactly 2 years ago. Usually when we do a rezoning study, there's 2 key elements in adopted plan that we use. One is the future land use map. Identifies mixed use, urban neighborhood, other type of future land use categories. Then we marry that with a tool that's usually in a small area plan. In this case, it was the built form plan in the neighborhood plan. And this identifies, in particular, in this case, height. So the built form plan identifies 3 height guidance areas, 4 stories, 6 stories, and 10 stories. So usually in a rezoning study, we take these 2 tools and we couple them together with additional policy language, and that's usually what comes forward in a rezoning study for our recommendations. We wanted to give you a bit of a sense of the outreach we did related to this rezoning study. So we actually had a community meeting back in January as the first step in kicking off the rezoning study. And then we spent a lot of time doing technical analysis. And then we brought our initial draft recommendations out in June to the neighborhood group and the Loring Business Association. Then we spent the summer meeting with, frankly, anyone who was interested in meeting with us about the rezoning study. We had focused discussions with a variety of property owners, and we met a few times with the neighborhood group and the business association. We came to the committee of the whole of Planning Commission a couple of times. We initiated our 45-day review on August 17th and ended it on September 30th. And we're here to you today. This will generally move forward to Zoning and Planning Committee of the City Council on November 12th and then be hopefully approved before Thanksgiving. When we were out in the neighborhood over the summer, there were two main questions that we asked. The first was, are we correctly interpreting your adopted plan? And the second, now that you've seen how your adopted plan gets interpreted into zoning, is this what you really meant? Those questions are very important as we go through a rezoning study. We're not meant to reinvent the wheel from a policy standpoint. Our job is to interpret it and to implement the plan. So those were the questions we asked, and we received quite a bit of good feedback related to those questions. As I mentioned, we had open houses and we went to a lot of the community groups. We also created for the first time in a rezoning study an interactive website. It was very helpful in answering a lot of the questions that we might get on individual properties. You could go to the website and see an interactive map. You could click on a certain property, and it had all of the relevant information related to that property, what the existing zoning is and a link to that, proposed zoning, any adopted policies related to that particular site, and links. So we felt like this was a really good tool that we hopefully will use in the future on rezoning studies and other planning processes. When we did our analysis, we used the four land use built form districts within the Loring Park Neighborhood Master Plan. This was just for ease of discussion. A lot of residents and business owners and property owners in the neighborhood identify with these geographic areas, so this helped us do our analysis. Early on in January, we identified that Loring Hill to the south of the neighborhood in yellow and Loring Village were going to be key areas of analysis, and they certainly ended up being that way. And so you will see our recommendations in the staff report, but we'll go over them related to these geographic areas. I'm going to ask Chair C. Munson to come up right now and start to talk about our policy recommendations in this two-phased approach.
Thanks, Beth. And I actually have a couple of handouts the planning commissioners have received, but the audience has not. So if I could just maybe for those who are here in regards to the Loring plan, I just pass those around. There's 20 copies that we might need to share. So thanks again, Beth. So I'm here to speak to the issue of deferred action. As you can see on the slide before you, we're really moving this forward in two phases. The first phase is for your consideration today for rezoning and moving that forward today. That's phase one. There is an additional phase that we're proposing for deferred action. In other words, to wait until a few other more things come into focus before we would feel compelled and ready to move that rezoning forward. So I'm going to speak to those two items, which are listed on the next. I'm going to speak to phase two items based on the next slide's list of concurrent future initiatives. So right now we are underway making a downtown public realm framework called Pathway to Places. This is new significant public realm guidance based on corridor identities. One of the handouts that's moving around right now is just some outtakes from the public realm framework, and planning commissioners, it looks like this. It should be in your packet. This document is not yet adopted, but when it is adopted, you'll see that Nicollet Avenue is identified as a destination corridor, And as you page through the document, you'll see that there are significant guiding rules and regulations that we would put into place about ground floor use, about the public realm quality. These are things that don't yet exist, and we are really depending on these policies to ensure the best outcome from private development in the future. We would like to have this finished before we rezone Nicollet Avenue. So that's one, and we can look at that a little bit more closely. The second item on the list is streetcar planning for Nicollet Central, and the second handout that I've passed around is this one. There's a number of pages here, and you'll see that there is a streetcar stop, again, on Nicollet Avenue, the 14th, 15th Street stop. That process, which is currently underway, is not yet codified. The city has made a substantial commitment, both a political commitment and a financial commitment to the process, to the tune of about $60 million, which is ready to roll. The federal picture is looking very, very promising. From all accounts, the city staff who are working on this say that the feds are really ready to roll. What we're waiting for is the environmental assessment, and after that, legislative action on operating dollars. So this is something that we see as happening, but again, until that EA is finished, we haven't gotten down to the level of actually planning for the station area. This is something that not only would add significant development potential and value to the corridor, but would impact how we would want to see that development come into play. So these are significant aspects of consideration, particularly for the Nicollet Avenue component of the plan. The following two, including the tourism master plan and the hospitality zone assessment, are more to do with the area around the convention center. And going back to the previous map, and I'm not sure if I can use the, yeah. So the area I was just talking about was here. Here. And the area I'm about to talk about is the rest of it here. So currently in the plan, in the adopted policy plan, that area is limited in height to 10 stories. And you all also have this drawing, which is part of the policy plan. It's called a built form plan. And you'll see that the convention center and the blocks surrounding it are subject to the 10-story height limit. So this is something that we think has come into new light in relation to the tourism master plan and the hospitality zone assessment. The tourism master plan really identifies the convention center as what it is, which is a regional and state asset. It is going to leverage future hospitality investment. We would really like to see, and the convention center would really like to see that be a flexible situation, not limited by what may be a too low height limit. We think we need more time to study this. We think we need to participate in the tourism master plan and look specifically at creating a framework of thinking around the convention center, and particularly the blocks surrounding the convention center. And I would say its relationship to Nicollet Avenue is also significant. We know that the neighborhood plan addresses that as well. But the hospitality zone assessment is an initiative that just ramped up. The DID is putting this together. They've engaged with a consultant, Responsible Hospitality Institute, to take on this issue of looking at kind of the entertainment, what I would call the entertainment district downtown. Again, this is substantially related to how we might think about the convention center district, how we might think about the area surrounding it, about people staying in hotels and so on. So these are things that are ongoing that we think need to be addressed and considered and completed in advance of codifying that policy. So I could have said all of that on this slide, but here you see tourism master plan, hospitality zone assessment, the public realm framework, and there you see an inset, which you also have in the handout, of the corridor guidance that's coming into play, the streetcar alignment, and of course, downtown hotels at the end of Nicollet Mall. So just to get into the areas of deferred action a little bit more, Loring Village District is one of those areas, and here you see, just zooming in on kind of the top triangle area of that brown patch, you see there's a key on the upper right-hand corner near Loring Greenway. So this area, again, you see the convention center, you see the Emerson School. There are a couple of hotels in this area. We think that this is one of the areas that would be impacted by thinking that will be developed through the tourism master plan, particularly, and should perhaps be considered in that way. You also see a little bit of Nicollet Avenue there. Let me see if we've got another slide. Sorry, that is the Nicollet Avenue slide. You see a little bit of Nicollet Avenue there, and again, looking at the 14th Street station area, the incredible proximity, which we all know, to the convention center, and thinking about what rezoning that area is going to do in terms of development interest. We know that that development interest is present. What we want to do is guide it appropriately. So again, looking more broadly at the area surrounding the convention center, this is an area that has, again, enormous potential development in the future, particularly around hospitality, potentially even residential uses. We think that perhaps there is a reason to revisit this idea in the built form plan of the 10-story limit. And I already spoke to this. So I'm going to pass it back to Beth to speak to those areas that we would like to forward for rezoning today, and can be available for questions after.
So the two other districts that we'd like to forward today for our recommendations are starting off with Hennepin Harmon District. The changes in the Hennepin Harmon District are going to look similar to what you've seen throughout the rezoning study. We're just making more nuanced changes related to the built form plan. In places where the built form plan called for 4 stories, we're usually using the OR2. In places where it called for 6 stories, we're usually using the OR3. And where it called for 10 stories, we're going to be using likely the B4N. So this is, like I said, this is a more scattershot in order to conform to the built form plan in this area. And then the Loring Hill District. This is a district that we've heard about for quite a while. In this case, we're proposing to take the OR3 zoning that allows for 6 stories, and replacing it with the OR2 zoning that allows for 4 stories. This matches, again, the built form plan in the Loring Park Neighborhood Master Plan. And so this has been a consistent recommendation throughout the rezoning study as well. So we want to summarize a little bit of the comments we received. They're in your staff report, but the 3 areas that we received comments on, Loring Hill to start with. Most of the comments about Loring Hill were supportive of the OR2. A lot of the commenters talked about the OR2 maintaining the character of the hill. One commenter wants to make sure to keep the OR3 due to the negative effect on property values. He actually suggested that FAR would be a better approach to Loring Hill rather than lowering the height allowed. In Loring Village, the comments we received during the 45-day review talking about Loring Village were all supportive of redevelopment on Nicollet Avenue. Many of the commenters want to see upzoning along Nicollet Avenue due to the activity center that was approved with the plan, and some even mentioned using C3A specifically. And then finally, in Hennepin Harmon, the policy document on the Basilica talked about 4 stories. Their existing zoning is OR3, which allows for 6 stories. And so our recommendation to match the plan is to come down to the OR2. A few people commented that the Basilica should not be rezoned. And so that's something I wanted to bring to your attention. Finally, we received some additional feedback beyond the comments in the 45-day review. This more relates to the 2-phased implementation approach. Comments have been submitted by the Convention Center in Minneapolis in support of waiting and further considering actions in the Convention Center district, particularly related to what Chair Stu was talking about, hospitality zone and tourism master plan. Concerns have also been raised about zoning around the Convention Center by the Downtown Council and the DID, and planning has concerns about upzoning on Nicollet Avenue prior to other guidance like the Downtown Public Realm Plan and the Streetcar. And finally, I wanted to read the recommendation specifically. CPED recommends that the City Planning Commission and City Council find that obtaining consent signatures for the rezoning of properties from residential to commercial in the Loring Park rezoning study would be impractical, and further recommends that the City Planning Commission and City Council adopt the above findings and approve the zoning map amendment for the rezoning of parcels in the attached exhibits. Any of us are available if you have questions, but that is the extent of our presentation.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've seen this a few times recently where we've had a small area plan that spoke to height specifically,
Yeah.
But then the zoning actually, so if we went forward with the down zoning, my understanding is though that our zoning code would still allow for people to apply for conditional use permits related to height in an amount that exceeds what the small area plan policy has stated. And
Yeah.
So I wanted to confirm that's true.
That is the case. We've been, for the last 12 years that I've been at the city, debating about the value of height guidance in a small area plan, and have gone back and forth depending on the climate in the city. But when we are working with a neighborhood group, we always talk about the fact that height guidance in a plan is guidance, and that even if we do rezone to that height standard, there's always an opportunity for a property owner or developer to request a conditional use permit. One of the criteria that we evaluate in a CUP is consistency with the small area plan.
Okay, so then I'll follow with a comment that I have seen that create an enormous amount of sort of confusion and conflict recently, and I have concerns about having that policy statement in the plan when the zoning doesn't really reflect that. And this body and then the council is tied by that legal reality that our code allows for heights that exceed what this policy guidance would say. And then I wanted to ask a separate question. I can leave that as a statement. You can respond to that or not. I was wondering why the Basilica zoning was recommended for change.
Yeah, I can speak to that. As I mentioned, the Basilica, I think, was a product of, in the small area plan, just an area that people didn't analyze, the consultant didn't analyze adequately, and it just kind of fell through the cracks. And so the Basilica is currently zoned OR3. And I think what we realized in the small area plan, and residents who speak during public testimony can speak to this as well, there were some cases where sites were given a lower height that might be historically designatable or designated already, which is not a perfect way to use a small area plan. But I think that's what happened in the case of the Basilica, that it got a 4-story height recommendation to, quote, protect it. And because we've been using that built form plan quite stringently in this rezoning study, it became evident that we wouldn't be consistent with the plan if we left the existing zoning.
All right, Commissioner Kronzer.
Thank you. I want to thank you for the chart. That's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. Your request.
That comparison it saved me some Google searching last night. So, first question is about the 4 plans that were just discussed briefly: the public realm, the streetcar, the tourism plan, and the hospitality plan. To the best of my understanding, maybe the stationary plan for a streetcar stop could be an adopted policy by the city. The other 3 are not adopted policies that have direct impact on a rezoning study. So I would like some clarification on that one.
I'm going to let Chair answer that question.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, those 4 plans have everything to do with zoning. And it's really about being able to comprehensively talk about the convention center district, both in its physical form and its development potential. So we've gotten pretty far down the line, bringing urban design into the city to doing something that we like to call framework planning. I think that's what's merited for the convention center district and would certainly have an impact. Now, all of those things have happened since the policy plan was adopted. So I guess I would say, the tourism master plan, that wasn't around. No one was talking about that when this policy plan was happening, including the convention center. They have a different position now. The hospitality zone assessment. We've been seeing a lot of growth in the city. This is one of our potential significant regional and state assets. And so my position is it absolutely is pertinent to zoning that we think about this area comprehensively.
Sure. So as I kind of sit here, read all the comments, hear the presentation, it seems like maybe a PO district overlay might be an outcome of these other studies. So I guess my question is, what's the harm of, in a year, doing a rezoning to add a PO district or another overlay district to this area, rather than just kind of put this whole thing on pause for an undisclosed amount of time?
So Nicollet Avenue currently has a pedestrian-oriented overlay district now. But as you know, the PO districts are, a lot of our zoning is becoming more progressive, in some cases even more than the PO district. Mm-hmm. The PO district doesn't deal with height, but it does help with the form and function of buildings. So it's there right now, at least as a placeholder.
Can you guys look to the future to see what recommendations might be coming out of these plans that specifically might impact what we're trying to do tonight?
I think from my point of view, particularly related to the 10-story height limit, I don't think there's a lot of agreement with that. Of course, that is part of the policy plan. So it would require that we look at that and look at it through the lens of what's now happening through the tourism master plan, the hospitality zone assessment,